And so, the incredible humility it takes to receive your humanness, the incredible humility it takes to receive the parts that are seemingly flawed, the humility to unconditionally receive your brokenness, unconditionally receive the brokenness in order to recognize that there is nothing excluded from this truth that you are, that you cannot transcend away from any part, because every part is yourself. And if there is a hiding, what you can be sure of is that it will come and find you. Just when you are bathing in the greatest divine light, it will appear from the shadows. You cannot escape from any part of yourself. And that is why it is about this unconditional receiving of your humanness. But of course, what we are speaking to here is your divine true nature, your wholeness, the being that you are. And it is about the being receiving all of the humanness into the oneness of clear seeing, that there is nothing left outside. There can be nothing left out of this wholeness. And so this gracious receiving of the humanness, the gracious, humble receiving of the brokenness, is to illuminate all of the patterns, all of the habits and ways, illuminate it all and graciously receive it all. This is why we speak about feeling the feelings, meeting the sensations, meeting everything just as it is. It is only through meeting every single part of yourself that feels to be divided, that seems to be flawed, that seems to be broken. Meeting and receiving unconditionally into the embrace of the divine, immaculate heart that you are. You cannot get away from anything, but it is not about mentally or working within psychological functioning to make those parts better, because that is part of the trap, is that the mind thinks that if I make these parts of me better, then they will be worthy of God. But in truth, everything is God. It does not have to be redefined and recultured according to psychological functioning to be worthy of God, because it is God already. But only God can see God. So in your true nature, as the light, it is to shine upon the shadows and see that shadows are only light in disguise, not even very well disguised. But God sees only God. Truth sees only truth. And this is what is in process. It is not about redefining the personality or the humanness. It's not about trying to fix or resolve the humanness. The humanness cannot be fixed. The human condition, let's say, the only way the human condition can be fixed is to see through the conditioning so that the human can live in its divine nature. So the divine and the human are living as one truth, one reality. So the fixing, let's say, can only be about seeing through the conditioning, seeing through that the character, the one that feels to be separate, is just a set of conditions. It's like a software program that's running. But it's not the full picture. It's not the fullness of who you are. And only the aware being, only the grace and humility of true aware being can illuminate that this is just a software program running. There is a misunderstanding and it needs to be illuminated. And in the illumination of the program, of the conditioning dissolves into what it truly belongs to. Shadow sees that it is light, because light is shining so brilliantly as love without conditions, that what seems to be shadow finds its resolve, finds its resolution in truth, not in being reconditioned by feeling like it is wrong and needs to be different and needs to work in all of these ways to be different. It's about receiving all of yourself just as you are. Of course, in the natural process of unfolding, different kinds of supports will come forward to refine and prepare certain patterns in order for there to be a readiness and a ripeness. But that part is a natural unraveling. What we are speaking of here is that in this moment, you can receive all of yourself. You can illuminate that which feels to be separate and see through the illusion of separation. In this moment, we are not speaking of this being a process in time. In this moment, can illuminate it all and rest in a deep openness that receives all of your humanness, all of your brokenness, whatever is happening in the play of life. Can feel there is a curiosity in the field about counseling and psychological work. So there is a place for this. It can be part of the natural unraveling. Let's say in order for there to be a ripening, a readiness to receive the fullness of what is being spoken of. But essentially, that which is happening in the play, it does not change the true nature. Your true nature is right here. There can be an utter receiving. And so what we would say, it is about receiving that brokenness, that humanness, and receiving that somehow there is support in the play that is helping some kind of unraveling happen. And it is to receive as the openness all of that, right? It's not an either or that we're speaking of here. We're speaking of the all-encompassing, vast being that you are, that is unconditional love, that just sees it all as itself, that God sees it all as itself, only sees God, only sees light. So it is this unconditional receiving of all of it equally. It's not about the mind working out, well, is this part okay? Is this support that is counseling or supporting in this way, is that irrelevant? It is to be the openness that includes it all. It's not a mental working out or understanding. Is this right? Is this wrong? Is this relevant? Is this irrelevant? It's this moment that is the utter openness that receives it all equally. This that is receiving it all is not broken. This that receives it all is the utter openness that is beyond broken and not broken. It is the divine that is beyond definition, beyond narrative, has no story, has no opposite. And this is the true nature. And let's say the true nature receives the whole play of opposites, the whole play of differentiation that is cooked up by the mind. But what we are speaking of is the humility that it takes in true nature, that is the true nature, that just receives it all. The humility to be yourself and to recognize your unbroken perfection, to recognize the purity and the immaculate being that has no story, has no drama, has no chaos, that is still and unmoving. And in the unmoving, unconditioned nature of this truth, the openness receives everything equally. And so then it is to see where it is the mind that divides, where it is the mind that questions, where the mind is trying to work out, is this included? Is this okay? Is this not okay? It's all okay in truth. It is to live in this moment before all of that. Live before it. Be the aliveness of life that just is. Whatever is happening is just happening. Whatever is playing out in the computer software of the human condition, it is just what's playing out. Who you are in truth is not touched by any of that. Who you are in truth is immaculate and whole right now. What is playing out on the surface is just playing out. But the more that you are resting in this truth that you are, this truth of who you are starts to permeate every cell. It starts to permeate into the flows of consciousness, and it unravels and melts certain flows that have moved as habit and conditioning. So the light shines, the warmth shines, and it melts what has been frozen in seeming time. But this is not psychological functioning. This is truth. This is the light that you are. This is the humble grace that you are, that receives it all equally. It is about this moment. And this moment is openness. This moment is an openness that is not dividing anything. It is an openness that is receiving it all. So as you are resting in true nature as the openness that is receiving it all, you are receiving all that you are. And it is in the receiving all that you are that you hold these places that have been conditioned out of protection, have maintained the conditioning, habitually maintained these conditionings that are defenses. And it is these conditionings that perpetuate the play of separation. And this is why it is so important to receive everything fully. Because if there is not a receiving everything fully, can be living in consciousness with a degree of awakeness. But when you move in the world, you will be moving from conditioning. And then there will seem like even a divide in your spiritual life, your awake life, and your human life. You will be playing a character out consistently and keeping a kind of notion of awakeness. But true awakeness is got nothing to do with division. If you are not living on the surface of life in full openness, if you are dividing the moment into opposites and comparisons and protecting, then the degree of openness and awakeness that may be known in consciousness is not being truly lived. And that is not freedom. That is not freedom. Freedom includes it all. Freedom is not an elitist club. Freedom is God. Freedom is a divine that is all-inclusive wholeness. It includes that which appears to be broken, malfunctioning, misunderstood. It includes it all because it knows in the deepest depth that any labels that have been given are not true. That there is an equalness in the oneness that is before any kind of division. And it is only through embracing and loving unconditionally all parts, even of the character, not by indulging those parts, not by playing in the story. True love, true openness receives everything through actually not engaging in story, but by resting as what is true and just shining the light of awareness upon all of the habits and conditions. It's an all-encompassing, unconditional love that receives everything into it. This is true surrender. True surrender that is the natural perpetual flow of life, is life living itself, all of itself in utter glory, not dividing anything, not creating any kind of separation. It takes humility to rest in the true being that you are and not follow the patternings of the mind and the conditioning. It is counterintuitive because the habits have been learned, and they are like deeply worn grooves. There is a sense of safety and familiarity to the me. But the more you come to know yourself, the more it becomes uncomfortable to play out those old patterns. So what we are speaking of here in the receiving of it all isn't about just playing out the familiar patterns. It is about resting in the true being that you are, that is aware and simple and open, that sees the patterns, illuminates, watches the mind, and in such great compassion receives it all in the innocence that it is, knows the innocence. And this is where a true resolution comes, a true healing comes, that these tender places that have moved with protection and conditioning can surrender into a depth of openness and love and light that receives their misunderstanding, their way of functioning, not by saying, oh, you have to be fixed, you have to come only looking this way, dressed in your Sunday best, right? It says, no, come, raggle-taggle, gypsies and all, come all, just the way that you are. But there's a holding the light, holding the love. It's not about engaging in a bargaining. It's an all-encompassing embrace that sees, and in that seeing waits for surrender to happen, right? Let's speak a little bit more finely about that. This is an integral part of that process of surrender, how surrender happens. There's no doing involved in receiving. You, what is speaking and who it is speaking to is the self. We're not speaking to the mind here. We're speaking to you, the being, you, the self that you are, you, the light, you, the one that just is, you, the love, you, the wholeness, you, the beauty, you, the divine reality. You rest here as yourself. And when you are aware of some kind of functioning of the character, instead of identifying with the functioning of the character out of habit, out of what has been learned, you rest here, just holding the true light of stillness, that there's nothing that has to happen, that you see where a pattern of conditioning wants to function. And the mind will be attempting to pull the attention to repeat that functioning, functioning of protection, of defense, a conditioned habit. It will feel very comfortable and familiar, and the me will want to fall in. It's like an addiction. So it will feel more comfortable to get a fix of a way of functioning, a behavioral pattern, an ego-centric patterning. It will feel more comfortable. But as the aware being that sees that, when there's the spaciousness to be witnessing, you see that, and you see the pull to repeat and to play out the old functioning. It's not about the pattern surrendering. It's not about the me doing anything to surrender. As you hold, right? So it seems like there's two parts of you here, and in a way there's the wholeness that is just in knowing. And there's this movement, there's a moving, an energy that's trying to pull the attention, and there's a stillness. You hold the stillness while the pattern of conditioning is trying all of its strategies and techniques, where the mind is thinking and using all of the ways, bringing interceptors and all kinds of ideas, why moving in the way that is familiar is the best idea. And this is where it's like an addiction to just fall in. But it takes this spaciousness and this resolve to rest, just as that which is watching, just to rest still as the awareness. You see it, you can see the pattern. Look at what the mind is trying, right? See the character is in the spaciousness of what you are. And as you see all of its attempts, you do not collapse the attention. You do not identify, you just keep watching. You watch and watch and watch. And when you do not give the mind the attention, when you keep holding the truth, it will bring up a lot of feelings, because the mind is trying to get the attention, and it will act like a tantruming child at times. It will try all sorts, and it will bring feelings of burning. It will bring feelings of frustration, because it's completely counterintuitive to what the mind and the me wants. The mind wants the attention to identify, and for there to be a collapse into the conditioned pattern, the protective pattern. It wants to keep itself alive, and it will keep trying. So what happens when you hold and you just let the feelings come, you feel the feelings, you just allow everything to be here alive, kind of like a little bit of a storm, or maybe quite a big storm, maybe just a gentle sprinkling of rain, but you hold true in the knowing of what you are. And at some point, that which seems to be the me and the mind, that is believed to be real, it's just patterns of conditioning, it's just this software running, it collapses. And that's where surrender naturally happens. And let's say then the human condition, that human part, surrenders into the divine. It finds its oneness. And then that which is holding true, it's like it just swallows into the love, the pattern. So no one has done anything. And what has been revealed in this is the innocence of the pattern that's playing, that it's utterly innocent, that it's a child. It's learned. It's not who you truly are. Because as you rest in resolve, you start to feel more clearly that you're the stillness, you the wholeness, you the one that just is. You not the pattern, not the thoughts, not the feelings and sensations, not that software of human condition that is running. You the wholeness, you the peace, you the truth, you the light, you the love right now. And this is the receiving of it all. This is the utter receiving. You're not transcending away from it. You're feeling it. You're letting the meltdown happen. The meltdown happens in that burning where the me is not getting what it wants, where the protective pattern is not being allowed to play out its illusion of being the master. And at some point, the pattern collapses in surrender to what it truly belongs to. And here there is the complete receiving receiving. So you're resting in utter openness. Whatever the mind tries to pull, whatever strategies of protection try to come in, you're just watching. And as you watch, you're holding the light of utter compassion for all of the ways that the child of the mind is attempting to tantrum and pull the attention. But you are the awareness that doesn't have to move into a learned pattern, a habitual pattern of going towards giving the child what it wants. You rest in what is true. And as you rest in what is true, you remember more deeply who you are. And as you remember more deeply who you are, that which is trying to pull the attention collapses in utter surrender. And then the oneness, then the wholeness is here and it's recognized. At the bottom of a surrender, let's say the humanness remembers its divinity, remembers what it truly belongs to. There is something similar that happens with the play of the world, with all of the ways that the mind wants to interact with worldliness and get involved in stories. It uses the involvement in story and talking and gossiping and getting involved in right and wrong, this and that, opinions and positions and strategies. It uses it all as an attempt to keep itself alive. But it is just to rest and just see it all. Whether it seems like it's like a personal software or a collective software, it's all the same. It's all a program, and it's being it's being created out of consciousness. So you have to come to your fine, pure consciousness in order to go before consciousness, to be before everything, so that you're not affected by the phenomena. You're not affected by anything that seems to be either personal or collective, because what seems to be personal and collective is still all consciousness, just dancing in patterns, playing out the game of separation. And you are before all of that. You only ever receive anything as awareness. You receive it all as awareness. And if you do not interpret, identify, evaluate, and go into the narrative about it, all you are really truly aware of is your own nature. It's a play. It's a world of phenomena. It's not to get pulled in, not to get tangled in. Live in true nature. It's like living in the beauty of being in nature, right? Where it's just silent and peaceful, and all you can feel is yourself, because there's nothing pulling the attention. Can live this truth in every moment. This is the true nature that is here. This is the immaculate light of this moment. It is utterly open. And just like all nature is the clearest reflection, because it is not announcing itself. It is not creating any kind of differentiation or comparison. It just is. And you in your true nature just are. You are simple beauty. And the simple beauty is utterly open. There's no division. There's no sides. There's no good and bad. You are utter openness. It's not too that as you live this more deeply, more and more deeply, you are pulled to live and only touch into environments and connections on the surface that are nourishing. But at times there will be the need to swim in the ghetto. Right? It's like you have to swim in the mud. Ramakrishna spoke about the fish that swims in the mud. And you can, when you're resting in true nature, you can swim, can move through the ghetto without being touched. The ghetto is the collective. We're not being politically incorrect here. Although somebody would probably be able, there would be a mind that would be able to find some kind of way of having an opinion. But language is just a language, right? It's just a play. We do our best. What we are speaking of is an inclusivity that is not dividing. It's not dividing even in the ways that the mind, even creates what's politically correct this way and that. It's all just more mind traps, ways of trying to be self-righteous, right? A me that's trying to say the right thing, being so embroiled in these surface of life trends. It's all nonsense in truth. It's all nonsense in truth. You are just love. You are just light. You are equality in your true nature. You don't need to fight on the surface. It's to live the truth of who you are. And there is no fight anywhere. There is no need for political correctness because you are living so much more deeply. You're living before all of these notions and ideas that are just more tangled webs of division. It's to live before all of the tangled webs of division. You are genderless in your true nature. You are pure. You are before any way of describing someone. And what we are speaking of here is the humility to be before it all. Be before anything that could possibly define someone. To be in the purity that is before ideas of what purity is and isn't. That purity is immaculate. Purity is pristine. And the true nature of all beings, the true nature of everything is that pristine, immaculate, right? Where there's no need to fight for this or that. And truly, the greatest activism that could be possible, the most profound move that you can make for all humanity in the most incredible equality is to be awake to your true nature, to be before all stories, be before all division. It is the most profound move that can be made in any human life. It is to know the divine nature, know the reality, and not be embroiled, not be entangled in surface dynamics, in the phenomenal world, not to be tangled, not to be tangled in that which is not real, not to be entangled in opinions and right and wrong. That is all just confirming and keeping the mind alive. So when we are speaking of this utter receiving, of course, this utter receiving sees the innocence of all of that, all of the ways that surface dynamics play out. See the innocence in ignorance, let's say. See the utter innocence, sees it all and receives it all with utter compassion, but does not for a second leave its truth to dance in differentiation in a way that divides, right? There's nothing to believe in. There's no concept that is true. There's no opinion that is right. We're speaking of the true righteousness, which is knowing yourself. True righteousness has no opposite. Whereas self-righteousness is where an ego is confirming itself and very full of quality of righteousness that believes itself to be right. Politics and religion are full of self-righteousness. So it is to be before it all. Be before division. Be before separation. And where you see, let's say, the only place you can make change is within your internal experience of how you are receiving your unique view of the world, how you are receiving, let's say, the collective even. Are you taking it personally, or are you receiving it in utter unity, right? Because if there is a receiving it personally, you are in division. And if you are receiving the collective personally, you will fall into good and bad, right and wrong. You'll fall into positions and strategies and conversations about the phenomenal world. What's politically correct and what's incorrect, right? You'll fall into all of these notions. When you are resting in truth, you are coming from a purity, an openness that is naturally kind, patient, loving. And that love that is without condition in truth does not engage in that which is not real. It is to know yourself before everything. And where there is a sense of personal experience, it is to receive just the sensation, just the aliveness, just what is happening in your nervous system in order to decompress the memory, the past that is stored in your nervous system. And so you can really rest, abide in this awakeness, can live this awakeness. When you live this awakeness, this is where you become truly useful for the whole and you become truly useful on the surface of life, not because you're sharing opinions, but then because you are the light, the love that just is, and you do not have to say anything to offer the profundity of the awake field. Just to be moving amongst your companions, you are uplifting the environment. You are bringing your wholeness, the wholeness, in the possibility of reflecting this to every being that you come into contact everywhere. So there is no ego involved in this. It's not a special mission. It's the naturalness of living this truth. This is the true service of living the awakeness. And of course, the more you are living in this awakeness, the more your environment, the more how you live becomes more simple, and it's reflecting this truth. And this is where we speak of that you can swim into the ways that you have to interact for work or family or whatever it is, even these days, just to go to the grocery store, is a bit of it's like going to the ghetto, going into the jungle of the Maya, right? Because there's so much buzzing on the surface, so much wanting to divide, so much wanting to perpetuate division and ignorance. But the invitation of truth, the outstretched hand, says, hold tight to who you truly are. Hold tight, not through opinion, but through your knowing, and continually releasing in your own inner process all of the ways that you can see that you create division, right? So what we're speaking of here has many possible threads that could come alive in each unique unfolding. It could bring, of course, greater clarity, and it could also stir up different ways that the play plays out for each being. But there is a universal truth that is the one truth, and it's all pointing to living so deeply that you're not living from your protection. You're not living from the software program of the me running, that you're living free of conditioning. You're living in such an utter openness that you include absolutely everything. When you include everything and you're living this wholeness, you're not affected by anything. Not in truth. It would be impossible, because you are invincible, undisturbable peace. Let us say this is true world peace. It's peace, a peace where you are not touched by the worldly play, and you recognize that underneath the play of worldly desire, that there is world peace, and it's the ability to receive worldliness and be utterly at peace. And of course, it has no opinion, has no division. It's before all separation and story. This is the great service. This is the great service and the true purpose of a human life. how the form is moved in the play of the world will be completely unique. Some beings will be moved to play on the surface of life by engaging in certain kinds of surface dynamics, in, let's say, activist kind of ways, or political ways, or religious ways. Who knows? All beings will be moved in the environments and situations they need to be moved in. When you know the truth of who you are, you start to see through the story, you start to see through the narrative, and you are shaken free of it all. Essentially, you are shaken free of it all. Let's say that both Ramana and Gandhi had equal power, right? But it is to know that the power is truth. The power is not the action on the surface of life. Let's say true action comes from the power of being docked in true nature. The true action is a natural movement that comes from being docked in the heart, that is the self. And then true action, whatever the laws of nature that make up the unique point have to move through on the surface, that will just be what it needs to be. Cannot even choose. It will just be what it needs to be. But in truth, you are the choiceless, immaculate, unconditioned being that is always resting in utter peace, regardless of what is happening on the surface of life. So to feel the stillness, feel the silence of the being, feel the resonance of where there is recognition of who you truly are. Feel where you are resting, where you are rooted. It's like standing in your power boots, standing in the self, deeply rooted in the infinite, boundless, timeless one that just is. Can see the character, can see the unique view, but you are not touched in any way, nor have you ever been touched in any way, never sullied. Always pristine purity, always. To know this truth is to know the, let's say, the supreme protection And in the knowing of this, all of the software that runs as protection for the me can fall away, can naturally surrender into the purity, the supreme, the light that is ever, ever crystal clear, self-sustaining wholeness. Mm. 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 The true deep nourishment of your own wholeness, resting in your own wholeness, can so openly receive all of your humanness, all of humanity, all of that which seems flawed and broken, can just see the innocence of it all. The mind, whether it is a seemingly personal or collective mind, it is a child. And in truth, you are always the great parent. It has no power. It is a child. It is a child. And you, in truth, are the great, supreme parent. In truth, you have given birth to it all. It is to see the innocence, and just rest in utter compassion of the innocence of the storm. The storm always passes. The sun always is shining.